become IT resilient with cloud-based disaster recovery from CloudInsyte and iland. A little bit of housekeeping. We are going to be recording this session so you can share it with your colleagues, coworkers, anyone who wasn't able to attend. We'll go ahead and send out the gift cards after the presentation. So look for those in a couple of days. And then if you have any questions while we're talking, please feel free to use the question and answer or the chat box, and we'll get to those as we go through the presentation. So with that, let's sit back and just talk a little bit about some IT resilience. So what are we going to be talking about today? So we're going to talk about the current DR challenges. I mean, a lot of people are struggling with everything that's been happening normally in IT, and then let alone the last 8 months of craziness, right? Talk a little bit about IT resilience strategies, and then really talk about how cloud has enabled organizations to really adopt not only disaster recovery, but a lot of other technologies. But before we get started, I want to thank CloudInsyte very much for having us in this presentation. And I'd like to introduce Kate. Kate with CloudInsyte. Would you like to talk to everyone a little bit about CloudInsyte, some of our relationships, and some of the things we've done together?
Absolutely, thanks. Well, hi everyone, I'm Kate Huber, co-founder of CloudInsyte, which is partnered with iland. Just for some background on who we are and what we do, CloudInsyte's vendor recommendation and management platform democratizes otherwise expensive analyst data on tech vendors. So our platform allows IT teams to understand an entire market and which vendors match their needs and preferences best in minutes rather than months. So customers look to us for support on projects like finding a disaster recovery as a service vendor that is compliant within their industry's regulations, or for vendors to plug into a data center consolidation or cloud migration project, or maybe for vendors that can offer cost containment within their cloud environments. So we have over 500 digital infrastructure and security vendors in our platform and growing. So we've seen a lot of customer projects. And the reason that we've spent the last 3 years pulling our hair out, frankly, to build this platform comes from the prior 10 years of our founding team manually vetting the technology vendor landscape or selling our ability to do so for our respective companies. So that's the part that you all probably deal with when you drive your RFP process or really any due diligence or procurement of third-party technology. So my team and I decided that there just had to be a better way to bring together businesses that need digital infrastructure security vendors and the vendors who want to engage with the right customers. We wanted a way that was less time consuming, less risky, while being more self-service, more data-driven, and more transparent. We're helping businesses spend more time and energy on their business and less on due diligence, but this time with better outcomes. So CloudInsyte is not a VAR, not a consultancy, not a pay-to-play research and analytics company. We're creating new ways that businesses can research, procure, and manage their vendors from a single platform. So Will, if you could just go to the next slide, thank you. So part of our vendor research, we are constantly identifying and partnering with new and exciting technology providers to benefit our customers. So vendors like iland provide our clients with award-winning services like their disaster recovery as a service and Office 365 backup that are more and more sought after, especially in regulated industries. So we often highlight vendors like iland who show exceptionally well within our platform and our client base time after time. So with that, I will hand it back to Will to take you on a tour of how you can achieve IT resiliency with cloud-based disaster recovery as a service.
Thank you, Kate. That's awesome. And yeah, I think everybody knows that, there's too many things and too many projects to do in a single day, and having a company like CloudInsyte help narrow down what they are looking for is a really true value add. So iland, just like Kate said, we do a lot of different stuff. We do disaster recovery, we do backup to the cloud, infrastructure, Microsoft 365. Our goal is to protect business and to power innovation, and really that's what IT kind of does, right? They allow their organization to innovate and to try new features and technologies, and it's not just about keeping the lights on anymore. It's really about changing the landscape of their business by using technology. But it's pretty crazy out there, right? We're kind of level setting here, but you can't read the paper without hearing about malware or ransomware or outages or mistakes in something. I just read 2 or 3 days ago, somebody had left a storage bucket in the cloud completely unlocked, and millions of personally identifiable information was leaked for people who use a hotel system, right? It's crazy, and everybody knows this, and it's pretty darn scary. And for IT, right? Nobody calls and says, "Hey, IT, you guys are doing a great job. Keep it up." It's always something's wrong or something's coming, and there's never a slow day in IT. And then you look at the last 8-9 months, and it has just been crazy. But yet, IT has stepped up and has enabled their organizations to do whatever they need to do in these times, whether it's preventing a hurricane or protecting their data or enabling remote workforce. So IT is to be commended, but there's always, always, always a new project, a new something to do, right? There's never a slow day in IT. Now, a lot of times we start talking about data protection, disaster recovery, IT resilience, business continuity. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. And sometimes your eyes will glaze over when you start hearing about some of this stuff because there's just so much information out there. When we talk about data availability, business continuity, there's everything from what to do if the power goes out, what do you do if there's a flood, what do you do if there's ransomware, but it really starts with kind of this 3-2-1 rule of data availability. You want to have 3 copies of your data. You want to be able to have your production copy. You want to have multiple copies as well for some sort of recovery scenario. You want 2 different media types, even for local backups, because think about it. If you have a storage area network and you're running all of your production virtual machines on there, and you're backing up to that same environment, if the power goes out, you have a double disk fault or something like that, you can be challenged with being able to recover that. Now you're down 2 out of your 3 pieces of data. And then finally, you definitely want one air-gapped offsite copy of your backup. And cloud has kind of changed the not only the financial availability, but also just the mechanics of getting your data offsite. You don't have to put it on a truck. You don't have to put it in your house in a safe. You just put it out to the cloud. You don't have to worry about hardware dependencies or anything like that, and you can recover easily. But backups are not enough in your environment, and that's what we're going to really talk about today. And it really requires this multi-layered data protection for everything. And a lot of times data protection can be thought of as firewalls or perimeter guarding or ransomware detection and stuff like that. But then data protection can also mean backup and recovery. And so there's so many different things to talk about. And the best thing about CloudInsyte is they can help you understand what your gaps are and where you can fill those gaps in. Now, part of what iland offers as a service is a comprehensive data protection approach to protecting and recovering the data. So, we don't do security, we don't do firewalls. We have that kind of technology, but the primary focus is recovering the data or backing up and restoring the data. And so we do that with cloud-based backup. We leverage cloud object storage, disaster recovery, which is what we're talking about here, and even cloud backup from Microsoft 365. And, I could spend hours and hours and hours talking about all of the different things we do and why you need to do them. And hopefully in 2021, we'll have a lot more conversations with CloudInsyte around some of the different product offerings and some of the things to do to make your job easier. But we're really going to dive into disaster recovery or really IT resilience. And again, we're kind of level setting, but but your data is your lifeblood, and you have to protect this data because no matter what happens, you can always buy new hardware, you can always get new operating systems, you can always get new applications. But if your data is gone or destroyed or unavailable, that's when you have challenges. So, you have to guarantee service availability. Making sure that your customers can get to your data or their data is paramount. It doesn't matter how good your infrastructure is, how many nines of availability, if the power in the building goes out, or if something happens and they can't get access to it. Accidental deletion, the human factor, the human element, this becomes such a huge challenge for organizations, and it still costs and causes a majority of the problems that we see out there. External and internal threats like ransomware and malicious insiders. Ransomware is it's rampant right now, and the Europol actually says that ransomware is attributed to some $3 trillion worth of revenue for the bad guys. More than trafficking cocaine and heroin. So you let that sink in and you start to see things like ransomware as a service and malicious scripts and these bots and denial of service and key loggers, and it can get pretty nasty out there. And it's always an arms race. And the bad guys are kind of always trying to do one better, right? And then when you think about malicious insiders, a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't have any bad apples in my organization. And probably that's true. But what we're seeing a lot is, think about the last 9 months, right? IT kind of shifted focus, and now we have all these remote workers. And I don't know about you guys, but I have, I got 2 kids and 2 dogs and trying to do my work and all that stuff. And, it's easy to just sit on my couch at 10 o'clock at night, open up Facebook, open up, something else. And then I've got my VPN, and I've got my, online email, and all it takes is one misclick and somebody else now has my credentials and could potentially do harm to my organization, right? So how do you prevent that? How do you protect that? Those are the kinds of things that are scaring people right now, especially with a lot of the remote workforce. Policy gaps, legal compliance, these are all things that, even Kate talked about. A lot of times IT comes in, they look at technology, they look at a solution, and they say, great, this is going to solve our need. And then InfoSec comes in, and the CISO comes in and says, well, but they don't have, ISO 27001, they don't have, GDPR, they don't have, RAP or FERPA or whatever it is. And then the whole project comes to a halt. So understanding what your policy gaps are, your long-term archival plans are, your legal and compliance and regulatory issues, all of that stuff is important, as well as protecting it from just something like ransomware or a power outage. So, all that stuff is kind of scary, and, it's pretty easy, well, moderately easy to find out the cost of an outage, right? So if you say, we have 100 employees and they all make, $30 an hour, and, my website makes X amount of money, and if I'm down for every hour I'm down, this is how much money I'm losing. And so you can kind of do those justifications in your mind, and you can say, okay, this is the worksheet we did, and this is the DR plan and the cost of an outage. But what about the intangible costs to your organization? What is the perception that your customers will have, or even your internal people are going to have, if there's not only an outage, but frequent outages? What about customer loyalty? How hard is it to obtain a customer the first time, and how much harder is it to reacquire them if something bad happens? Think about it in your own personal life. If you go somewhere and they've either, exposed your data or lost your data or unavailable, you're going to go somewhere else, and it's going to be really hard to go back to the other person. And then confidence, both internal and external. This leads to shadow IT, and this leads to customers finding different things or requiring different, legal terms just to do business with you. So the intangible costs are usually much more than just the financial hit for not making an order for an hour or paying your employees for not doing anything. So that's a pretty powerful tool to think about when you're considering, like, what is it going to cost me for, being out or being unavailable or anything like that. But it's not all doom and gloom, right? And so, over 96% of companies with a trusted backup and DR plan, they're able to survive ransomware attacks. And you can kind of extrapolate this, as well into things like hurricanes and, power outages and hardware faults and so on. So it really comes down to, you have to know that there's the potential for some sort of issue, outage, whatever, and you have to plan appropriately. And the people with the right plans and the right processes in place are usually successful in maintaining their data, maintaining their availability, and maintaining their customers. But that being said, backups are just not enough, right? True IT resilience lies in the ability to quickly recover your organization. So what does that mean? Well, if I take a backup at 9 o'clock at night every night, and something happens the next day at 8 o'clock, that's with the recovery point objective. So recovery point objective is, when do you want to have that data available to go back to? So if I take a backup at 9 o'clock and something happens the next day at 8 o'clock, I'm 23 hours out of date as far as the content that I need. And then backups can have a painful recovery time objective, which is how quickly I can get that back. So if I'm 23 hours out of date and it takes me 5 hours to recover everything, I'm starting to hit a really big number. And then I have to tell everyone, come in and redo everything that you did because we don't have it, right? So now all of a sudden, it's just something as simple as a deleted object that was done the next day can really cause pain for an organization. Local backups can be targeted by malicious software such as ransomware. So, again, if you have ransomware and it locks up your entire system, and then it also locks up your backups aren't really going to do you any good. And then your backups have to restore to something. Again, if you have a fire or a flood or an outage and the power's not there, it doesn't matter how good your backups are. It doesn't matter if you're doing a backup every 15 minutes if you have nothing to run it on. So IT resilience truly means both backups and disaster recovery. And the disaster recovery part requires you to be able to bring that environment online at a push of a button anywhere in the world. And that's what IT resilience, that's what cloud-based disaster recovery really comes into play. And I've been doing this for decades, right? So, DR has always been kind of that thing. We're almost at the end of the year, people are submitting budgets. DR usually the first thing that gets whacked. Nobody wants to pay for it because, you have to go to finance and say, well, now I need twice the equipment. I need to get a secondary data center, and I need to have power and cooling and rack and stack, and I have to have staff, and I have to have licenses, and just in case, a lot of finance people look at that and say, no, that's not going to happen. On top of that, IT is already overburdened. They don't have the time and the resources to completely build a second data center just in case. Replication, duplication can be costly, both in terms of WAN, licenses or whatever. And then, again, I've been doing this for a very long time. And, back in the old days, you would, shut down production, and you would, take a long weekend and try to bring up your environment, and you have this 3-ring notebook and nothing would work, and then take 3 days and everyone's pulling their hair out, and at the end of it you say, well, hope we don't have to use this because it's not going to work, and then you just bring up the production environment. So testing was always risky and prone to errors and prone to human errors and all this stuff like that. So that's always why disaster recovery has kind of been kicked to the curb, because it's always been very challenging. But before we talk about some of the technology stuff, let's talk about kind of the business side with disaster recovery. Now, this is where CloudInsyte can really help you understand where your gaps are, what you're trying to accomplish, where are the things that you need help with, and they can come in with all of the different solutions and ideas and things like that to help you understand that. But it starts with the assessment. What do you even have? What are you trying to protect? We've been so kind of blessed with virtualization that 10 years ago we didn't have that, and now all of a sudden we have it, and so I can spin up anything anywhere. But now I have so much stuff I couldn't even tell you what I have. So you have to know what you're trying to protect. You need to know what you're trying to organize, and then you need to go to the business owners and say, hey, look, what is your expectation for this environment to come online? And when you're having that discussion with organizational leaders and business leaders, it's not about SQL 07 and App 04. It's all about how quickly do you need the manufacturing process to come back online? How quickly do you need the financial paperwork stuff to come online? Put it in the right terms, and those people will understand what you're asking. Now, they may have unrealistic expectations. Oh yeah, I want it to be up in 3 minutes and us to not lose more than 17 seconds worth of data. Okay, that's a different challenge, but just understanding who owns what you have, when it needs to come up, in what order, how quickly does it need to be up for the business to continue running, is all important stuff that you have to understand long before you choose a technology. And then when you kind of think about notifications, who do you tell if there's an alert? Who's the one that actually chooses or makes the decision that we're going to fail over, or we're going to do something that's impactful to production? Who makes that executive decision? How do you notify the right owners of the applications, that kind of stuff? And then finally, validation, testing, and reporting. When was the last test? Are you comfortable in your test? What were the results? As more and more organizations are looking into like cyber insurance, the cyber insurance companies are getting wise, and they're saying, hey, look, we'll give you a policy, but if you don't have a proof of that you did your due diligence and you did as much as you can, and you have audits that prove that you have a solution in place to prevent and to mitigate as much risk as you can, we're not going to give you this policy. Or maybe you're, regulatory, and you need to, answer to some sort of regulatory board about what you're doing. So you need to be able to report and test and validate on all this stuff. Doing it once a year over the long weekend doesn't work anymore. Even your customers may come to you and say, hey, I just saw so-and-so just lost my data or exposed my data, and I want to move to you. How do you prove that that same thing's not going to happen? And so you're going to have that kind of information ready for your customers as well. Now, all of this stuff has changed fundamentally in the last couple of years because cloud-based disaster recovery makes your job easier. It really does. And disaster recovery as a service is the way forward. So you don't need to purchase a secondary data center. You don't need to go to finance and ask for capital expense for 3 years worth of hardware that you may or may not ever touch. And a lot of people say, oh, well, I'll just take my old stuff and I'll put it in another site and I'll replicate to that. And the challenge with that has always been, it sounds good on paper because it's quote unquote free, but at the same time, you're taking something that's old, out of date, no longer under warranty, and you're pushing it to another location, and that's what you're going to rely upon in the case of a disaster. It just doesn't make sense because it sounds good on paper, it doesn't work in reality, right? So leveraging cloud has kind of changed the economics beyond just buying equipment, and now it really becomes a pay-as-you-need, pay-as-you-consume cost model. It's become affordable, and it's allowing every organization, any organization, the ability to leverage disaster recovery and global cloud-based services. Geographic redundancy may be important or may be necessary. If you're in a hurricane zone, you don't want to replicate your data to the next building right next door because that doesn't do you any good. You want to make sure that you have geographical diversity and redundancy. You may also be regulated by data sovereignty rules and laws that require your data to only live in certain places, and that may change how you do your disaster recovery. And then with virtualization, encapsulation, and cloud-based disaster recovery, you now have the ability to test anytime. So, back in the old days, you would shut down everything on a Friday and hope you could get it all working by Monday. But now you can come in on a Tuesday morning, press a button, go have breakfast, go have lunch, come back from meetings, and now you've got a full report of a non-disruptive testing that shows you all of your virtual machines, all of your networks, all of your applications, what failed, what didn't fail. And if something does fail, great. Now you can actually address it now, figure out I forgot to replicate this VMDK. Oh, this dependency wasn't met. Oh, I've got it on the wrong network. You fix all that, run the test again on Wednesday, get the report and says, yep, this is all working. So now I have faith and confidence in my testing, in my disaster recovery plan. So if anything happens, I can either do full site or partial site failovers. And that automation orchestration is all key, right? Because if you think about it, if you have 10 virtual machines, it's very easy to just power them on in the right order, wait until services start and do all that stuff. But if you have 510 virtual machines and you've got multiple dependencies and different organizations requiring different networks and different things, the last thing you want to do at 3 o'clock in the morning when your entire organization is down and executives are on the phone and business owners can't get to their stuff is pull out a big 3-ring binder and say, all right, number 1 is turn on this guy. Now, you can't do that, right? So you automate, you orchestrate, you test so that you have full confidence. So even if you're in the middle of a traffic jam, you can pick up your phone, log into the website, push a button, and fail over your entire organization. Now, at iland, we've been doing this for a very long time. I'm going to talk about that, but you've got a couple of ways you can do this. You can do it yourself, or you can work with a partner like CloudInsyte and iland to give you the access to the support, the technology, the availability, and the help that you may need to be able to run this. Now, when I talk about, one of the iland differentiators, one of the things I like to talk about is the iland Secure Cloud Console. Now, the iland Secure Cloud Console is a unified management platform that gives you access, visibility, and management into all of your cloud-based services. So it doesn't matter if you're doing one thing with us or you're doing all your things with us, you have full visibility. Now, and that's especially important when it comes to IT resilience and disaster recovery. So we have something called the IT continuity tab. So we've got tons of videos online and you can find out more information. And again, I could talk for hours and hours and hours and days on this stuff. But if you go online to our YouTube channel and stuff, you can see a lot of information. But basically within the Cloud Console, there's a continuity tab. And within the continuity tab, all of this stuff is kind of pre-configured, again, before a disaster, because you don't want to be trying to deal with all this stuff when your hair's on fire, right? So you create what's called recovery groups or groups of dependencies and applications. And that allows you to take that business need that you found out at the very beginning of this process, find out, okay, the finance team needs these 17 applications or these 17 virtual machines or networks or whatever. They all come together. They all need to be application dependent. They all need to be consistent, etc. That's a recovery group or a dependency. So now you start to create these things, and then you can have kind of the whole site failover. So if the power goes out or if there's a hurricane, you can fail over everything. But a lot of times you may only need to fail over an application and all of its dependencies. So again, ahead of time, you do all of this fact gathering and understanding of the needs of the business and the needs of the technology. And then you can create these recovery groups. And then finally, you create what's called a run book. And a run book is an automation and orchestration platform within our console that allows you to do all the things like who comes up first, how long do you wait? Because again, if you have 17 virtual machines that are all part of this application, and if the app server comes up first and then SQL comes up, and then SQL, like the services don't start in time, and then the third server comes on and it tries to ping the server and it can't get the services, and then AD doesn't work, and you just have to reboot it all anyhow, so it doesn't make sense. So within the orchestration, you can actually say this virtual machine comes on first, it waits 3 minutes. Once it waits 3 minutes, this server comes online. Oh, and they're all on this one vSwitch, or they're all on this virtual LAN, or micro segmentation or whatever. So you can orchestrate all of that stuff so that at the end you press a test button or you press a real failover button, and boom, you actually invoke either a full site failover or a test plan, and you go from there. And then reporting, I'm going to show you some of the screenshots. You can see throughout the console all of the reporting that you get, that again gives you the comfort level that your stuff is working properly from a testing perspective. But then also, if you fail over and actually have to run your environment, right, that it's running in the cloud properly. So for example, here's the iland Secure Cloud Console. Over on the left, what you'll see is a bunch of virtual applications and virtual machines. Because think about it, once you fail over and it's up and running, you need to now access it, because you don't have Virtual Center anymore. You don't have your data center. You don't have anything because it's gone, or whatever caused you to invoke a disaster recovery scenario, it's not available. So within the iland Secure Cloud Console, you can see everything from the virtual machines to the networking to the security to the accessibility to the performance, all of that stuff. And then you can also see things like, depending on the technology that you leverage, you can see if your recovery groups are running on time. Do you have the bandwidth to keep them up to date for the RPOs and RTOs that you're trying to do? You can create multiple run books. You can do all of that stuff. And then you can also see what's actually in process of failing over or anything like that. Here you can see some RPO performance metrics. The wizards throughout the console allow a very easy to use process to create disaster recovery runbooks, orchestration. Everything you need to do is all wizard driven. So it's very intuitive, very easy, especially because we run on a VMware native cloud. You can take your virtual machines and you don't have to transform them. You don't have to convert them. You don't have to worry about your tools. You don't have to worry about your drivers. All that stuff just works. You're literally just replicating your virtual machine and bringing them on into the cloud. You can match VNICs, you can match vSwitches, you can match VLANs, you can do all sorts of stuff within the cloud. Again, testing it, validating it, making sure it runs. So you push a button and you're good to go. Here's the failover wizard. You can see that you could do full site failover or partial site failover, again, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And then your report. So this can be used for regulatory or compliance reporting. It can be used for internal. It can be used for executive reports, whatever. But basically, it'll tell you, hey, look, this was successful or this wasn't. And I don't mean to say this in the wrong way, but it's okay to have a failure during a test, because you can fix it now. What you don't want is, you don't want a failure during failover because you didn't do any testing, right? So, oh, I forgot to replicate this virtual machine, or oh, I forgot to, put these virtual machines on this particular host or this particular VNIC. Let me fix that, rerun the tests, get all my successes, and now I have full confidence that my plan is going to work. Now, within here, this is where the networking is done. So again, networking is one of the most complex things, and disaster recovery is no different, right? You need to make sure that when you just failing over virtual machines doesn't just work, right? I mean, you can replicate virtual machines and VMDKs and all that stuff. You can assign some CPU and memory and you power it on, but that's not everything, right? If you have 17 different vSwitches and you've got a whole bunch of different microsegments and you've got a bunch of different VLANs and stuff like that, if you don't configure all that, nothing's going to talk to each other, right? So within the iland Secure Cloud Console, you have full access to the network layer, the software-defined networking of NSX from VMware to create all of that stuff. You can do your routing, you can do your layer 2 VPNs, you can do your DNS and DHCP and routing and all of that stuff, so that whether you're doing a full site failover, a partial site failover, whatever, that virtual machines, when they come over, they can still communicate with each other. They still have all the same VLAN tagging. They have all of that stuff. Again, very important, because networking can be one of the more confusing or challenging parts of disaster recovery, making sure that everybody can talk to each other in the cloud just like they do on site. Once you actually are running in the cloud, right? Because again, you don't have access to you don't have hands on the boxes. You need to be able to have full access and management and visibility into all of your machines. So here, just like you have in Virtual Center, you have the ability to edit the properties, give it more RAM, give it more CPU, add a VMDK, open the console. Think about how many times a virtual machine comes up and for some reason it's the NIC is disabled, or maybe it's blue screening or something like that. If all you have is an RDP session, you can't necessarily troubleshoot it. So within the console, being able to open the virtual machine console just like you do in Virtual Center gives you that flexibility and power to get inside the virtual machine and do whatever you need to do. You can also see all the performance. So again, once you're running in the cloud, you're now consuming cloud-based resources. So you need to make sure that you're not running into CPU wait times or disk latency issues or anything like that. So all of the performance graphs, all of the metrics that you normally judge a virtual machine by in your own site, you can leverage the same tools inside the cloud. Now, one of the other things is as your virtual machines come over and they get failed over and they get brought online and do all that stuff in the cloud, the last thing you want to do is forget about security, compliance, backups, right? So you don't want to be running in the cloud for 2 days and then realize you don't have malware, you don't have backups, you don't have whatever, and then something bad happens. So within the iland Secure Cloud, as soon as a virtual machine comes online, it's automatically added to a full host of security and software tools, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then in addition to that, you can optionally choose to have backups enabled for that. So as soon as a new virtual machine comes online because it's being failed over, it's immediately added to its own backups, and these are air-gapped offsite backups, different from the virtual machines themselves. So again, like even if you failed over because of ransomware and then ransomware was still there and it encrypted the virtual machines, and you couldn't recover, they're not going to be able to see those backups and encrypt the backups. You'll be able to restore those as well. And then because all of the disaster recovery tools that we have leverage the ability to go back in time, you can choose, oh, well, I got hit by ransomware at 3 o'clock. My 255 replica may not be good, so let me go back to my 2 o'clock and bring that online and test that. And before any of that happens, you can actually say, is the test successful? Do you want to commit it? Once you commit it, it makes it live, and then you can actually start keeping track of changes, whether you want to fail back or you need to reverse replication because you've got a new site or anything like that. So that's all built into the software. This is the security screen I was talking about. So as soon as virtual machines come on board, they're automatically added. You've got denial of service protection, you've got malware scanning, and these are all agent and agentless, depending on which technology is being used. You can choose encryption, all the firewalls built into NSX I talked about, web reputation. You can check your support requests if you have any. You can see all of your vulnerability scans. So, some people are even using the test as an additional vulnerability scanner. So for example, you're running your test, it's Friday night, you run a test, it's non-disruptive to production, then you let it run over the weekend, you make sure all the services work, you make sure everything can ping and all your applications work, and then you run a manual scan and you find out that, oh, hey, these 17 virtual machines have this one particular port open. Do I really need the port open? No, let me go ahead and close it on my production site so that the next time it replicates over, I don't have any of those issues. So that kind of stuff can be used. So it's all about leveraging, we like to say do more with DR. It's all about leveraging the tools and capabilities you have within your environment or in the cloud to just make your job easier, make it just simpler. And then finally, because cloud has kind of changed the economics around disaster recovery, you need to be able to see that. You need to be able to forecast that. So instead of going to finance and saying, hey, I need 2x the equipment and a secondary data center and power and cooling and rack and stack and all that stuff, you can actually find out, this is exactly how much it's going to cost me in storage. This is how much it's going to cost me per hour to run. It's all pay as you need, pay as you grow, pay as you scale. And it really changes the economic model of disaster recovery. So it really can become not only affordable, but almost a no-brainer, because now you are truly protected. Now, this is great. So everyone's like, woohoo, all right, Will, I'm ready to go. Let's go. Okay, well, how do I start, right? And a lot of times somebody will come to me, I mean, I'm a cloud guy. Somebody says, hey, I want cloud. I'm like, great, how much do you need? And then they say, well, I don't know. And so again, luckily we have this tool called Catalyst. So you can work with CloudInsyte and your reps there, and they can actually run a free analysis tool to right size your environment. So it'll tell you how many virtual machines you have. A lot of people don't even know how many virtual machines they have or how much storage they're consuming. Is it all thin provisioned? Is it thick provisioned? How much, when you ask a DBA how much RAM they need, and they say, well, I need 128 gigs of RAM. And then you say, well, I don't really want to pay for 128 gigs of RAM for this server if it fails over. And you run Catalyst and you find out it's really only using 16 gigs of RAM on average each day. So it can help you right size your environment. And because the iland Cloud is a true sized environment, you're not purchasing bundles like small, medium, and large that may or may not fit the needs you have. It truly is purchase what you need. You can also do various scenarios to find out, what's my bandwidth requirement? Like, do I have, if you want to recover and protect everything within, 3 minutes, but it's some dial up in the middle of nowhere for your remote office, you may have to update your bandwidth. So you can do bandwidth testing to find out where each of our global data centers not only live, but also how they react from a latency and a performance perspective, and whether or not you can actually meet your RTOs and your RPOs by pushing the data through the pipe. You can do backup determinations. How much backup do you need? How much size do you need for that? How much performance if I'm running this for a day, a week, a month, whatever, and understand all of that information from what you have. Again, going back to the very beginning conversation with the business owners, what is it exactly you have? What are you trying to protect? And then how do you get there? So with iland Catalyst, you can actually right size your cloud environment. Now, cloud-based disaster recovery leads to cloud-based infrastructure. And so this is a whole nother conversation we can have. But when you think about what IT is trying to do on a day-to-day basis, right, there's the entire stack. You have everything from the bottom of facilities and storage and network and server and hypervisors and OSs and all sorts of stuff like that. And then you kind of have moving towards the top of the stack where you really get into that business value. IT's job is to provide technology that can enable the business to accelerate, right? So whether it's quicker time to market, whether it's new processes, cloud has really revolutionized how people are able to adopt technology. And think about your own personal life. And I love to say, consumer behavior drives enterprise adoption. Think about what you do in your personal life. You got your phone, you got your laptop, you can do all kinds of things. You can order food, you can get, Grubhub, which is, where the gift cards you're going to be getting from us comes from. Like, you can just have food delivered to you. Like, how come it's so hard to do anything in the enterprise? And it really isn't. And cloud has kind of changed the model of how people are able to do things. And so now when you think about disaster recovery, you think about protecting your environment, it's no longer this 9-month process of, finding a secondary data site and finding, updating firmware on servers and cabling up stuff. All that stuff is gone because the cloud takes care of most of that, and you can focus on the business value of IT innovation, the applications that can drive your business. And the best thing about cloud is if you make a choice and it's the wrong choice, for example, you want to try out a new PeopleSoft software or whatever, in the old days, you had to buy all this equipment and you installed all this stuff and you did all this, and now you're stuck for 3 years with something that may not work. With cloud, you swipe your card, you try something out, and you find out whether or not it's going to work for your organization. Disaster recovery is the same model, and it allows for you to quickly become IT resilient. Now, Kate talked a little bit about this, but a lot of organizations, whether they're regulated or not, or their customers are regulated or not, are starting to look into some of these compliance certifications and attestations as guidelines for companies that they want to do business with. So these are some of the non-compromised geographic and industry-based compliance and certifications that we have in our cloud. So, tier 3, tier 4 data centers, all sorts of things such as HIPAA and PCI DSS and ISO 9000 and 27001. And as you start looking at global requirements, maybe you're looking at either expanding, or maybe you're already a global organization. What do you do for GDPR? What do you do for Australian RAP? What are some of those things that you have to be aware of? iland has a full legal and compliance team specifically around data retention and data sovereignty and data concerns to help you understand what you need and what attestations you have to abide by, and how the iland cloud can fit into that. And again, this is the conversation that you're going to have with CloudInsyte, because it's really about not just, hey, I want technology that can replicate my VMs. That part's solved. We already got that handled. We want to help you solve the business challenge and the regulatory challenge of making sure that you can be quickly up and running in the right organization and the right cloud as quickly as you need to. Now, with that being said, we have been doing this a long time. iland has been delivering IT services for over 25 years. We have over 12 years in cloud and disaster recovery expertise, 11 global data centers, as you can see here, so we can meet your needs in all of that aspect. Now, we're also extremely excited and happy to talk about our 100% financially backed availability, and especially our 98% support satisfaction, right? The last thing you want to do is realize that the choice you made for disaster recovery and IT resilience when you have a problem is send an email and get a response in 48 hours. Like, that doesn't count, right? It's 3 a.m., executives on the phone, something is down, it needs to be back up and running. You have full access to our 24/7, 365 tier 3 live support all the time, and our support satisfaction scores show that. And our net promoter score of a +71 is huge when you think about our customers telling their colleagues, their coworkers, their friends in the industry about how we do our business and how we're able to make them successful. We're also a clear leader in disaster recovery as a service. Gartner's actually put out the Gartner Magic Quadrant for disaster recovery as a service, and we were a leader the last 4 years. And so that's really telling, because it's both the technology, it's the partnerships we have with our partners, it's the console, it's the environment, it's everything that we do, from support to hand-holding to validating and verifying. Everything we do from start to finish is about making you successful and making sure that you are not done with us until you have that successful test in hand and say, yep, I'm good to go. And it's not just, not just Gartner. We've got all kinds of industry awards from people who have said, hey, they know what they're doing. We're trusting our technology with them. We're trusting our business with them. Let's go from there. Now, that being said, there's nothing that says trust and confidence and success more like an actual case study or talking about an actual customer. So I'd like to introduce Jay from CloudInsyte. Jay, I'd love for you to hop on and talk to us a little bit about some of the case study that you have, and talk a little bit about Bluestone Financial, some of their challenges, and what you were able to do with them to be successful.
Thanks. Well, I want to discuss the case study where we successfully deployed iland's DRaaS platform into Bluestone. Bluestone's a mid-sized financial institution with offices in US, UK, Ireland, and Australia. They were looking to exit their legacy data center and colo environment and move into a hybrid approach with the cloud-first initiative. Their DR was being hosted in a legacy colo facility when they're looking to migrate into the cloud with a production/DR hosting strategy. iland was able to meet their Financial Conduct Authority regulations and their ISO 27001 standard requirements. We successfully exited their DR colo and moved their DR environment into the iland cloud with security built in. We were able to save Bluestone Financial 40% compared to all the costs associated with their previous DR colo spend. iland was able to support Bluestone Financial's cloud-first initiative to support vendor diversity and their multi-cloud strategy. So it was a win-win on all fronts.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, and you know, at the very beginning, you know, Kate had mentioned, you know, over 20 iland deployments already this year, and talking about the successes that we've had together as a partnership. It's very powerful when it comes down to you know, having the conversation with our customers and realizing that, you know, sometimes it's just a lack of time, it's a lack of expertise. I mean, you know, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I really want to spend the next month of my life trying to figure out disaster recovery, right? Like it just doesn't happen. So you have CloudInsyte, and you have the people, you know, like Jay and Kate, who can help you have that understanding, because they work with it with all these customers. All these different people have the same challenges. You know, very rarely when I'm talking with somebody do they have a different challenge than probably somebody else I've talked to. So why not go with experts? Why not go with industry leaders such as CloudInsyte and iland to just make it easy for yourself, make the job done right and done the first time, and go forward. Now, that being said, you can always reach out for more information. This is Jay's information, so if you want to reach out right to Jay and talk to him. We also have a success center at success.iland.com. We have a ton of information, videos. We have YouTube videos. We have you know, instructional things on, like, here's a demo, or here's how you do this, so you can really get an understanding even before choosing technology, just how easy it is to quickly bring your environment up online and run. We have a ton of blogs as well at blog.iland.com. And so with that, I want to thank everybody on behalf of iland, CloudInsyte, everybody for joining. There's so much information out there, and sometimes it's overwhelming, and you know, that's where CloudInsyte can come in. They can help you understand where your gaps are, what your challenges are, and kind of distill some of the huge amounts of information down to what you truly need. So with that, I've seen a couple of questions come in. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us on behalf of iland and CloudInsyte. Have a wonderful week. We're going to take some questions. If you have any questions now while we're answering, please feel free to use the question and answers. Kate, the first one I have is actually for you. How do they get involved or with you know, kind of reach out to CloudInsyte to just start the process of understanding you know, that distilling of information and all the different product offerings that are available, and make the right choice?
Yeah, so so we would actually have you go through our platform to answer some questions about, you know, what exactly it is you're looking for, what the project is, you know, a little bit more about your company. So if there is any regulatory compliance that needs to be considered, you know, we want to make sure that we have a holistic idea of your business and your project's needs and preferences. So yeah, so you know, we can get you started. Just email hello@cloudinsyte.com, and we can have you get set up in the platform.
Awesome, thank you. One of the things I wanted to answer that I saw is about full site availability or partial site availability. And I know I kind of talked about it off and on, but when you think about, again, going back to the applications versus virtual machine concept, you know, as you start grouping your virtual machines together, and as you start thinking about how you're going to bring your organization online, within the iland Secure Cloud Console, not only do you have those recovery groups, but you have the recovery runbooks. And so you can literally just say, all right, this is going to be, let's say we've got Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, and PeopleSoft, right? You can create 4 different recovery groups for each of those and all the dependencies, so you know which virtual machine networks, you know, which VNICs, which VLANs, which you know, security settings, which virtual machines all go in there. And then as they're being replicated to be application consistent at different times to meet the RPO objectives, you know, you can actually say, oh, well, you know, maybe we have a you know, radiology thing where, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, within the last 2-3 hours because it's mainly for reading. So as long as I can get it up and running, I'm good. Versus my, you know, financial database has to be within 5 or 10 minutes and it needs to be up first. So then you create these recovery runbooks that basically allow you to do individual applications or an entire full site failover. And again, with the ability to test all of that, you'll know exactly how your environment's going to perform and exactly what's going to fail over. So hopefully that goes for that. I see a couple other questions that we kind of sort of answered throughout, so I won't go through that again. But I've got probably another minute or so if anybody wants to ask any other questions that I may have missed. Or hopefully I did such a great job of answering everyone's questions that everyone is ready to go out and implement cloud-based disaster recovery. So with that, Kate, Jay, is there anything that you would like to say for parting before we head on out?
Yeah, just thank you everyone for taking the time for this lunch and learn today, and look out for an email from us or from iland with that e-gift card for Grubhub. And yeah, like I said, if you have any questions or want to get set up and just try a couple project questionnaires through our system, just hello@cloudinsyte.com or find me, Kate Huber, on LinkedIn, and we can go from there. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Jay?
and thank you for the time. I'll be following up later this week. If there's any interest on your end, perhaps we can schedule a meeting with one of the engineers at iland or subject matter experts, and then go from there. So you'll be hearing from me shortly.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much to CloudInsyte. Thank you everyone on the phone. Have a wonderful week, a wonderful holiday if you're going to have a holiday next week. If not, still have a wonderful week. Stay safe out there, and we can't wait to talk to you next time. And take care. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.